Welcome to ZKast, everyone. I'm Zeus Caravala from ZK Research, and I'm joined today. I feel like I'm in the old movie Office Space. I'm joined by a pair of Bobs. First up, Bob Laliberte from Enterprise Strategy Group. Bob, why don't you say hello?
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Great to be here. Thank you, Zeus.
And also, I've got Bob Friday, who's the founder of Miss Systems. He's the CTO of Juniper's Enterprise division. I think he's widely regarded in the industry as an AI guru. Bob, a quick bio on yourself.
Yep. Hey, Zeus, thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. Now, Bob Laliberte and I are going to tag team a little bit with you, Bob. Obviously, there's been a lot going on in networking in the area of AI. In fact, there's been a lot going on in all of tech in the area of AI. I think one of the technology categories that has a lot of potential to transform is networking. I think, in fact, arguably, the operational model in networking hasn't really changed much in the past, several decades. In fact, prior to being an analyst, I've been an analyst now a little over 20 years. I was a network engineer, and I think most network organizations within companies really work the same way I did, right? And so there's been some badly needed innovation, and AI has been the thing, I think, to drive that operational change. And so, Bob, you, as I mentioned, you founded Mist, over 10 years ago. And it was back then, nobody was really talking about AI, and you were really kind of a visionary back then, right? So you've been using AI longer than most. And so what gave you the vision initially to introduce AI into networking that long ago?
Yeah, Zeus, like you said, we've been in the industry for a long time. Back then I was at Cisco. And back then I was talking to some very large retailer companies, and I was trying to convince them that they should remember connected mobile experience, that they should put these mobile apps on their network for their customers. And I had a very big retailer basically tell me, Bob, we're not putting anything on the network until you can promise me that the controllers will stop crashing. They wanted me to keep up with, they wanted me to make sure I could release code faster than once or twice a year. And then more importantly, what they really wanted, they wanted to make sure that I could really guarantee that the user was going to have a great experience on the network if they were going to put something like, they were going to give their customer an app. And that's when I kind of realized there was really a paradigm shift. We still have to keep the APs, the routers, and the switches. We still have to keep all that stuff up and running in green. But what was more important was actually keeping this whole critical customer experience app up and running end to end. And that's when I realized that paradigm shift, right? Instead of just managing boxes, we're really managing this user to cloud, client to cloud experience. And probably the other thing, if you remember back in those days, a year or two before that, you remember the Watson playing Jeopardy?
Yeah.
That was everything. I was like, okay, guys, if they can build something that can play Jeopardy, we should be able to build something that can actually manage and operate networks on par with IT teams. So that was kind of the beginnings of, hey, there's something changing architecturally here, technology-wise. We're really in a position to build a real-time, kind of a real-time cloud AI ops architecture.
Yeah, I do like the fact that you brought AI first to Wi-Fi because, of all the discussions I've had and the research I've done, Wi-Fi troubleshooting is by far the hardest thing in networking. There's so many variables, and all people know is it's not working. But it can be everything from a DNS problem to an association problem to an AP problem. And in fact, one of the data points of my research last year was that network engineers that work on Wi-Fi spend about 25% of their time doing nothing but troubleshooting. So if you can eliminate that, I mean, they get over a day a week back. Like how great is that?
Yeah. Plus that's all exacerbated by, that's also the area where you get the most turnover. Right, yeah. Where people are constantly upgrading to the latest technology and having to go through those same issues all over again.
Yeah. Well, I would tell you this, Zeus and Bob, that what the other thing you notice is, when I did Mist, we built an access point. And people always ask me, Bob, why did you build an access point? It's not because I thought the industry needed another access point. It's because I wanted to make sure we could get the data needed to basically answer that question, why you're having a poor internet experience. Yeah. And really, you're right. Wi-Fi is like, if you're trying to answer that question, a lot of that has to do with the wireless link and making sure you have the data that you need to answer that question.
Yeah. Now I noticed Juniper initially had been using the term AI driven has recently changed to AI native, which I think is probably a more accurate descriptor of the way you've built it. So, but I'd like to hear in your words the difference between AI driven and AI native.
Yeah, for me, if you look back, like I said, when I was at Cisco trying to make that decision to leave, one of the big bets we were making was basically, hey, if we're going to go move to this real-time architecture, cloud architecture, does that really an architectural change, right? Because we weren't going to beat Cisco and Aruba and these guys with new features, and really the big bet at Mist was, yes, this is really an architectural change. If you're going to build a real-time cloud AI ops platform, you need a blank sheet of paper. And so when you think AI native, think blank sheet of paper. You really need to start from scratch. If you're going to build an AI-driven network, you need a foundation that really can support that. And that gets back to that cloud infrastructure, building a cloud infrastructure where you can basically, do production pushes every week, right? That's fundamentally a new architecture. And that was really the bet. So AI native really means blank sheet of paper, cloud architecture.
So if I were to think of an analogy that people might understand, that's more commonly used, the initial wave of cloud wasn't really cloud native. It was people taking legacy apps, putting them in the cloud, versus today where they rewrite the apps or they create all new apps are created to be cloud native. Similarly, in this area of networking, you can take a legacy system and you can try and bring AI into it, but that's going to give you marginal benefits compared to building the system from the ground up with AI in mind. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right, Zeus. The first generation was like, hey, let me take my controller code, stick in a container, and stick it on the cloud.
Yeah.
That is not cloud AI needed. When you actually get into cloud, what people don't really appreciate, unless you're a connoisseur, is really the software architectural change. 20 years ago when I was doing aerospace, we were putting code on Linux boxes and shipping it out to customers. That's what I kind of call spaghetti code. When you move into these cloud AI architectures, you're really basically going to this microservices and you're architecting it such that each microservice is isolated, right? You're moving to more of an API architecture. And so that's really fundamentally a change in software architecture.
Yeah, no, well, when in the example I gave before with Wi-Fi troubleshooting, I tied the value to Wi-Fi troubleshooting. You've seen lots and lots of customer deployments. What are some of the benefits customers have seen? Because I'm sure it's more than just operational.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, one of the first benefits is just, there's benefits in just moving to the cloud. When we started this, before we even got all the AI stuff working, a lot of our customers saw benefits in making sure the data they needed for troubleshooting was in the cloud, right? And so if you look at some of the things we've done, like dynamic packet capture, hey, when there's a problem on the wireless, making sure we capture that packet and send it back to the cloud, that's what the customers first appreciated, was basically eliminating for SSHing, right? So if you ever go to a support team, and believe me, this was a hard thing to do at Mist, making sure you have the data you need to answer a question. The other hard thing is making sure you can get an IT, taking away their SSHing keys.
Yeah.
You think you're stealing their lunch, right? It's like, guys, I don't want you SSHing into these devices. So I think that is the one benefit. I think the other benefit, once we get that data to the cloud, probably another big customer had a problem with Zoom. They had a site that had a Zoom problem. With this AI stuff, we're now able to take that Zoom data, combine it with network data, and basically we were able to figure out that, hey, what really was going on was they had to misconfigure VPN, right? They're routing traffic from India to Australia and back again. And that's what I call the needle in the haystack problems, right? These are the type of problems where the combination of cloud and AI is really starting to open up the eyes and make it easier for IT teams to troubleshoot these application issues when they get calls.
Yeah. And that's certainly one of the, what you said there is also an extension, right? It's not just about sometimes the networking pieces, but being able to drill down into the applications as well and be able to see at that level what's going on to be able to enable organizations to drive a better experience and a better outcome.
Yeah, because you think about IT teams, right? We had another really big customer. Basically, they get a phone call that basically says the app is not working.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all they know. It's like, well, what's not working? Well, all they know is the app is not working. And this poor retailer, he had to fly all the way to California, got there. We found out it wasn't even a Wi-Fi, it was a cellular problem. Right? They didn't even have the visibility to know what network they were on back then. So that's the benefits of having, just starting to get visibility to point of, hey, what network are you on? What problems are you having?
Yeah, no, I logged a lot of air miles and driving miles troubleshooting branch offices. So I hear that.
Cool. So one of the areas that ESG has been researching on, we ask about, is around digital transformation initiatives and as organizations are maturing and what their goals are. And one of their top goals always comes around delivering an enhanced experience. So I'm wondering, Bob, if you could talk about, now that you're bringing the AI native networking platform to market, maybe talk a little bit about how that AI component matters to it and how that's going to relate to delivering better experiences for organizations on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, Bobby, usually I tell people you got to think of like AI is the next step in the evolution of automation, right? Teams have been automating for 10, 20, 30 years. The subtle difference is back then we're using these very deterministic regression algorithms. We'd write something that wouldn't change. What's happening right now is as we move into these deep learning, you're seeing it with ChatGPT. As I said, what we're doing with Zoom now, we're actually building models that actually can predict end user experience, Zoom, Teams experience, right? Once you can actually accurately predict these experiences, then you can start to understand what features are actually responsible for causing better experiences. In that example with the big retailer, right? We're starting to be able to start connecting about here, whether it's a client, wireless, LAN, WAN problem, we're really starting to figure out what piece of the path is actually causing the most pain to our customers.
Yeah, and that's going to clearly be more important as organizations continue to distribute their applications all over the place, right? So private data centers, multiple public clouds, edge environments. So like you said, just that first being able to isolate at a higher context and then being able to drill down to ensure that as these applications are migrating, you're still maintaining that great experience for them as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this call here, right? It's amazing that this is even happening, right? You think about what has it, how a packet got from your office, my office, into your office. It's a miracle that this all actually works right now.
Absolutely. So another area that I wanted to touch upon, clearly there's anytime a new technology comes out, there's a lot of, let's call it AI washing that occurs in the industry, right? Suddenly it's very cool to have AI. Like I said, you've been working on this for about a decade now, but suddenly it's become, the hype has really increased. A lot of organizations are using AI as part of their marketing. And quite frankly, right, some are AI and some aren't. So I'm wondering if you could maybe help the listeners better understand, how do they know whether AI is real and it's not just part of a PowerPoint presentation?
Well, Bob, so you're in the industry. We have this discussion all the time, right? And when I talk to analysts, they're like, hey, Bob, your PowerPoint does not look any different than the other guy's PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Why should I believe you? And what's the difference? And usually I would say, when I left Cisco to start Mist, there was the architectural piece of the puzzle, right? I knew I had to go build this cloud, real-time cloud infrastructure from scratch. The other people don't appreciate, I also realized there was an organizational change, right? It's hard, everyone knows it's hard to build new things in big companies. It's even harder to change the organization of a big company.
Yeah.
And one of the things we had to do at Mist, we had to tie our support team right next to our data science team, right? Because your support team is people who actually understand networking and the problems. The data science team is a team that understands the math. And so if you look at Mist right now, every week, my data science team and my support team get together to understand what they can do to make my support team's life better. And that's probably the biggest difference. And I tell most customers, first thing you ask your vendor, are they actually using their own AI ops tool in their support team? If they're not, they have not started the journey on cloud AI ops, because that's the first step on the journey, is making sure you're using your own. It's either eating your dog food or drinking your champagne. I don't know which one's better, but it's one of those things. That is the first step on the journey to cloud AI ops.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense that they're using it, but it also points out to me, I'm thinking about those. So I heard three things: make sure they're using the right data, And one of the ways they get that is having to have an organizational structure in place so that the support team is always feeding the data science team. These are the most pressing issues that need to be solved, right? And here's the data to support it. And then obviously there's got to be the underlying architecture, right? This isn't just on a lift and shift and hey, we're plugging into chat GPT to instantiate our AI program. This is something that you've spent almost a decade on building, refining, and bringing to market and tweaking and making it more, efficient for organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you, like, so when I started Mist and started working on this problem, it took me a year to get the right data. Once we started looking at the problems and support, it took us a year to get the right data from the AP and switch back to the cloud, right? So that you're right on that, right? And that's why we built an access point, was to make sure we can get that data. I would say the other interesting data point is compared to like what I did 20 years ago at aerospace. There we're basically sending data back every minute or 2 minutes back to the controllers, right? This time around, we're sending back asynchronous data. So in addition to like sending data back every minute on the status of the device, we're also sending data back every minute on the user state. Mm-hmm. So if that user state changes, we immediately send a packet back to the cloud to reflect that. And that's probably the other paradigm shift, right? We're actually keeping track of every user minute on the network, right? We've moved from a paradigm of tracking the AP to now we're tracking every user minute on the network.
I actually think the other area that Juniper's done a nice job of, and actually you were doing this, pre-acquisition too, when you were with Mist, is actually the AI systems get better over time, right? And so I think you've also help customers understand that AI systems do get better at the time. They may not be perfect initially coming out of the box, but over time they are self-learning systems and they do tend to get better. And I think that's a big indicator whether the vendors slapped AI onto some kind of automation tool or is actually doing AI, because it does get better over time. And I challenge all the vendors, show the efficacy of it, right? And if you're afraid to do that, then I think that's something customers should be concerned about.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Is if you look at the Zoom model, and that I would say that's kind of a double-edged sword, right? That's that evolution of automation. Or old automation never changed, right? The same script that you wrote basically did the same function day in, day out. With AI, this is really like a network assistant. This is like hiring an intern that you're adding to your team, and you have to really develop a trust. This is like you hire someone new on your IT team. You have to get to understand what that person can do. Same with these AI assistants. You got to understand what their skill level is. And yes, you expect them to get better as they actually start using the network. And that's where you really find out if we're doing deep learning. And usually the difference I say is between machine learning and deep learning is once we get into these deep learning models, those models are being trained daily or weekly, right? And that's where you start to get, yes, as we get more data, this model gets better at predicting your user experience.
Yeah, and in fact, I heard an interesting. I was talking to the PGA Tour actually about what they're doing with AI, and they were saying that one of the things they like about it is that they said it lets the untrained eye see things that only the trained eye could have seen before. And in networking, I mean, those trained eyes cost a lot of money, and we relied on them heavily to do basic troubleshooting because the data was just too hard to interpret. And I think that's another area that AI adds value. Now, I wanted to pivot a little bit to the topic of generative AI. But it was a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a quarter now, that ChatGPT got launched, and the whole world woke up to AI can do everything, right? So, which isn't really true. But I'm curious as to how generative AI fits into the Juniper Mist story.
Well, there's a couple angles here, Zeus, as you pointed out, right? I would say I have a lot fewer AI skeptics now.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago. Yeah. Now people say, hey guys, they don't know how it's doing it, but they can see it's doing some magical things and generating things that sound like humans. I would say the other paradigm shift we're seeing in the industry is we're slowly seeing networking go from this, hey, we all started with CLIs. We slowly moved you over to dashboards. Natural language is going to become the next user interface into the network. Right. And I'm not sure if you're Star Trek fans.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all these Star Trek technologies are starting to become real.
Yeah.
Remember the talking computer?
Yeah.
We are on the verge. That's where we're headed now, into this networking spaces. This natural language interface will become your next user interface into the network, getting you to problems and data and insights quicker and easier. It's also really going to change this whole networking assistant, right? When you dig into the actual how these transformer algorithms work, they're also going to be a key part in helping you troubleshoot and pull together all the disparate knowledge inside of it, a complicated network.
Yeah. The only problem with the Star Trek analogy is that Captain Kirk always figured out how to outsmart the computer.
Yeah.
That's why they have the feedback loop, so that if the person on the other end is smarter, they can provide the recommendations.
Yeah.
Well,
so you actually look at the natural language part of this, and the generative part is actually being able to transform networking in a much bigger way than just what you would initially set out to do with AI.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been a believer since, I think we've had the CI and Marvis since 2018. So I've always been a big believer in conversational interfaces and actually becoming the next user interface. Mm-hmm. What ChatGPT really did is they brought the natural language generation part of it, right? We had kind of the natural language understanding. We had algorithms for basically understanding what you were trying to ask, but we really didn't have any way of actually generating a response. So what's happening with ChatGPT and Gen AI is it's bringing that natural language generation to the party. It's also bringing new tools, just straightforward deep learning tools, and basically training models to help troubleshoot networks. So there's two aspects of Gen AI. One is the user interface component, and the other one, hey, it's bringing another tool inside the data science toolbox.
Got it. Very good. So one of the other areas we want to talk about today was some of the newer technology that you're bringing out, and I see you've got your badged with Marvis today on your jacket, but there's the concept of Marvis Minis and what that is, and maybe you can explain what it is and how that helps customers.
Yeah, I mean, so Marvis started with, like I say, ingesting data from the network. And that's great when you have users on the network. Now the problem is, okay, what happens when I don't have users generating data, right? So this is all about the paradigm shift from managing boxes and network elements to managing users. Minis starts to basically put a synthetic user into the system in the network that basically lets us start to make sure that that network is ready to go both on a pre-connection and a post-connection. So that pre-connection is all your association, authentication, DNS, DHCP stuff. Now, post-connection is all about making sure those business critical apps are ready to go when you turn that network on for the first time, or when you turn that network on at 8 o'clock. You want to make sure when people start to walk into the office, the network's up and running, ready to go.
Cool. So yeah, make sure ready for business type of testing. Is this something that I've heard of? Some of these testing before synthetic testing, it requires additional devices to be deployed and things like that. Could you talk about that a little bit? Is that the case, or is this something that's fully incorporated into what you have?
Yeah, we are not a fan of overlay networks.
Nobody likes that.
Yeah. No one likes having to manage another element or another overlay network. So Marvis Mini is actually built into the infrastructure itself. It's built into the network elements, the access point, switches, and routers. And more importantly, Marvis Minis has now become an extension of our cloud. So as we start to do these weekly, monthly production pushes, Marvis Minis is part of that. And then really that's the innovation time, right? And so that's the other thing people appreciate, or people want more speed. To your point of digital transformation, right? They're basically can upload or build new apps in days, weeks, right? They want their infrastructure to be able to have that same sort of speed. You want to be able to update the infrastructure as needed quickly.
Yeah, the problem with the overlay networks too is that because it does require more hardware, you actually have to go constantly update those boxes, and it's a lot of work. And then you wind up with an overlay network to your overlay network, and it gets so complicated it's hard to troubleshoot the overlay, the regular network. So
And it causes more problems than it solves.
Yeah.
Usually.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So having that virtual representation of the users to perform that synthetic testing provides a huge advantage for organizations wanting to make sure their environments are continuously optimized and available for business.
Yep.
Cool. So a little bit different as well. I'm wondering, since we've got you, if you could maybe talk a little bit, if we could switch to maybe looking at a visionary type of, looking out in the future, and let us know what you see as the future of this cloud AI ops at Juniper.
Yeah, if you look at, when we started this adventure, we started at the access point, like you said, because we were trying to answer the question of why are you having a poor internet experience?
Yeah.
If you look forward, since we've been at Juniper, we're starting to extend that Marvis Cloud AI ops across the entire enterprise portfolio. Right. And so that's starting to let us to answer new questions like, why are you having a bad application Zoom experience, right?
Yeah.
That access brought a lot of layer 2 information. As we move into the router, that brings a lot of layer 3 information. If you see what we're doing at Juniper, we're going to start extending that across the broader portfolio into the data center. And so that starts to let us start to answer questions like, why is your point of sale gone down? Is it a LAN or a DC problem? So you're going to see us start to extend cloud AI ops. Think data ingestion. We'll brought it from enterprise portfolio, data center, SP portfolio, and then we're starting to ingest data from the applications itself, right? So you think about cloud AI, it's all about data. Data is the new gold in the new system. The more data you bring to the party, the more questions you can answer with more granularity.
Yeah, right. Well, the more good data, though, right?
Yeah, and what you were saying, Zeus, as well, right, is that having the additional data, having that additional context, the more domains you bring into this, the greater the efficacy becomes in this in solving what the problems are and troubleshooting issues.
Yeah, in fact, there's a data science expression that says good data leads to good insights. And I'd argue in networking, the way it's been designed in the past is we have silos of data, and that leads to fragmented insights. And so maybe, if you run your WAN and your LAN and wireless LAN separately, you may get some good insights in those, but you don't really know what it means from an end-to-end experience perspective, correct?
Yeah. Well, I would say, so ultimately I make one barrel of wine. So for all the winemakers, we all know, good grapes equals good wine, so good data equals good data science is my analogy usually.
Yeah. Now for your customer, Bob, the people that use this product, the network engineer, a lot of the ones that I've talked to about AI, especially early on, had a lot of, let's say, trepidation about a technology that they look at that could replace their job. In fact, a lot of what you see written in the media, but generative AI in particular, is what jobs are going to go away. And I'm curious, what's the role of the network engineer? So if you're taking away their SSH and you're taking away their command line interfaces and they're not cutting and pasting scripts and things anymore, what's that role look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're watching what network engineering is transforming right now, I mean, as I said, we've gone from the CLI to the API. So the first step in that transformation was they're all becoming Python programmers, right? The next generation of network engineers have to become programmers. For most of the engineers I work with right now, they see AI as more of another tool that's going to make their job easier and better. Now, I've had several network engineers tell me, Bob, I really don't care how you do it. I don't care if you're using LSTM transformers or what's under the hood. As long as it does something useful, they'll use it. So I think what I see right now transferring their job is really basically bringing another intern. IT teams are going to be bringing these AI assistants on as almost like another intern on the team to help them solve problems quicker and faster. And they're going to treat it as another, kind of another virtual person on their IT team, which I think leads to trust. Goes back to that analogy. These AI solutions are not deterministic automation algorithms, right? These are basically much more complicated things that are doing stuff on par with cognitive reasoning.
Yeah, the analogy I use is a little bit like if you look at the automotive industry, that vision of the self-driving car is still, years away. But there have been advancements along the way, like autopilot, like lane change alert, even parallel park assistant things that make us better drivers, right? So it hasn't, maybe one day, years and years from now, we might, have a world of all driverless cars, but I'll be dead by the time that happens. So, and I think in networking, my advice to network engineers is, as you said, you look at it as a tool that's going to take your engineering skills and just make them a lot better, because you're not doing a lot of the mundane things you were doing before. In fact, one of the pieces of advice I give network engineers is, if you're doing things today that aren't strategic to your resume, stop doing them. Right? Find a way to automate them out of your job. So
let's clarify that you still need to get those things done.
Yeah.
You just want to put, don't just stop.
I would say, when I tell people, you look what's happening in our whole society, right? I mean, when you go to your doctor, these AI tools are being used to help diagnose cancers and stuff. You're going to want to make sure your doctor is using the latest AI to help diagnose, right?
Yeah.
When you buy that car for your kid, you're going to want to make sure that car has the latest AI safety things. And I think networking is the same thing. When you get on a network, you're going to want to make sure that network's using the latest AI to make sure it provides you the best Zoom Teams experience that you can get.
Yeah. In fact, the doctor analogy is a good one. A couple of years ago, I interviewed the head of data sciences at Mass General, and he was saying that initially, when they brought in AI to look at MRIs, the doctors were dead set against it. And then they realized that instead of spending 90% of their time diagnosing the MRI and instead of treating the patient, and this would do that for them, and they could spend more time on the patient side. Now they're all on board with it. So perhaps just a little experience goes a long way.
Yeah, and that's a trust thing, right? They've learned to trust it. They've learned it, they trust it, and now it's part of their daily routine.
Yeah, and I think honestly, from my perspective, that's to tie this all together about what we're talking about. It's that, how do organizations, what's that time to comfort? How do they become comfortable with the technology, validate that it works? And so, there's that quote out there right now that's saying, look, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to the person using AI. And so it really is a transition that has to happen, and organizations really need to embrace the technology so they can advance their business. They can deliver better experiences to their end users. So, Bob, I'm wondering if you could maybe, provide some advice for those organizations that are looking to embark on getting AI into their network, and maybe share some best practices based on the organizations you've already worked with on, hey, here's what we've seen is the best way to get started and to integrate the solution into your environment.
Well, I think this goes back to your question about, how do customers tell the difference between AI works and real AI? My general recommendation is, get Mist, get a building, get a production building, and try it. Because you really cannot, until you actually get it up and running in a real environment, then you start to appreciate that visibility, right? You start to realize, yes, getting data back to the cloud does make a difference. These AI algorithms, the machine learning, deep learning, you start to appreciate the difference between deep learning and machine learning. And how deep learning things like ChatGPT are going to start making a difference and make it easier to get to problems and find out what's going on in your network quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from speaking to some of your customers, I mean, just the real world environment, talking to a higher ed a university, 200 trouble tickets in one semester using a legacy system, deployed Mist, tried it out, went from 200 down to 2. And so that transition and that ability to see the value that AI brought, not only from reducing the number of active trouble tickets, but also going and being able to be predictive and find and fix problems before they generated trouble tickets as well.
Yeah.
And I would say that gets back to that customer support piece of it. Because you think about it, my customer support team is a proxy for my customer. The fewer support tickets my support team sees is the fewer tickets my customers are generating. And that's what I'm saying. That is the first step on this journey. If you haven't tied your data science team to your support team, you haven't really started the cloud AI ops journey.
Yeah. A little while ago, I was talking with the person that runs the contact center at Hilton, and they put an all AI system in there. And I asked her, well, how'd you get started? And she just said, we got started. Right. and her point was, you can sit around and talk about how to get started, but you got to get started sometime. Right. And I think I've interviewed some network engineers that have used some of these tools, and they make some mistakes, and they go and they almost wait for perfection. And my commentary there is, don't wait for perfection. The threshold is better than people, and people make a lot of mistakes. And that's, again, to use the automotive industry, people have a lot of accidents, right? And if you look at the accident rate of self-driving cars versus people, it's a lot lower on the self-driving car. And so every time one has an accident, we freak out and say the world's not ready for them. But in reality, they're already better than people. And I think where you've got missed to today, it's so much better than people troubleshooting, right? So even if it does make the occasional mistake here or there, the other important part to understand is that gets fed back into the data set, that it won't make that mistake again where people do, right?
I would say bad cable is a good example. One of the algorithms we came out with is bad cable, and people quickly figured out that, hey, it's right 95, 98%, but it's cheaper and easier to replace that cable, even if it's wrong 2% of the time. Those are the type of things that IT teams start to figure out. Yes, it's 98% correct, 2% of the time. Yes, it's cheaper still to be it. And funny, I had the same argument with someone on Gen AI. It's like, well, how accurate does it have to be before we release it? 100% accurate. It's like, you guys know, it does not have to be 100% accurate. It's going to help them get to the right answer quicker. Most people are smart enough to know if that answer is going to help them get to the, is pointing in the right direction.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking at the clock here, I think we're going to wrap this up. That was a great discussion, though. Any closing thoughts, Bob Laliberte first, and I'll let Bob Friday have the last word.
Yeah, I would just say, I think overall, the advice I heard and the takeaway from all this is that, there are very mature AI systems, AI ops environments out there, and that you shouldn't wait. Now is the time to engage. Now is the time to adopt, deploy, and learn from them, and really embrace AI and see how it can impact and help your business, not only from an internal IT operational efficiency perspective, but also from a customer experience perspective.
Yeah, and I think the world has gotten, networking has gotten exponentially more complex, and that gap between what we can do with people and what the networks have become is widening and widening. It's never going to close unless we're willing to do something different. And I think that different is embracing AI. And so, Bob, I'm going to give you the last word. Just any closing remarks you'd like to say?
Yeah, as we discussed, when I started my career 30 years ago as a wireless engineer, if you had bet that I ended as a chief AI officer, we'd all be billionaires by now.
Yeah.
So I guess I would just say it is amazing. It's a fun time to be in networking, and cloud AI ops is here to stay.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see that bet in FanDuel or things like that. So I didn't get to take it. So anyways, thanks for discussion, guys. On behalf of the two Bobs, I'm ZS Caraval from ZK Research saying thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on another ZKast.